the Independent Oil Association of America held their annual meeting at a big hotel down in Houston, Texas. And they got this PhD speaker from somewhere way up in the Midwest to come give them a speech. Now, I wasn't there, but he forevermore made a speech. It so inflamed and enthused all those oil folks that they got their executive committee together and said, listen, let's hire that fella and put him out on the road giving this same speech, just wherever we can get a crowd of people to listen, because it's so good for the oil business. So they did. They hired him. And they gave him a big limousine to drive around with, and they hired a chauffeur to drive him around. They gave him a little blue seared suit that he wore with a little chauffeur's cap on. And they went out giving this same speech just all over the South, the Southwest, and all around. And after about 4 or 5 months of doing this, giving this same speech every day for about 4 or 5 days a week, they're driving down the highway, you know, and the chauffeur kind of looks in the rearview mirror and says, Professor, what? He said, life ain't fair. He said, my good man, why would you make a statement like that? He said, I've heard you give that speech now for about 4 months. And he said, I can give the speech better than you can, and they're paying you back all kinds of money back there, and they pay me minimum wage. I can hardly get by, feed my family on what they're paying me. And he says, I can give the speech better than you can. And the professor said, well, I'll have you to know I've got my BS degree, PA. He said, no, I don't care, whatever, you got all that stuff. He said, I've heard you give the speech now for 5 months in a row, about every other day. I've got the speech memorized. I'm a better speech maker than you are, and I can give the speech better than you can. It's just that simple. The professor said, I'll tell you what, you and I are about the same size, and we're getting ready to go to a university where they've never seen me. They don't know what I look like. You and I are about the same size. You pull over up here at this roadside stand, and we'll switch clothes, and you can be the professor and give the speech, and I'll sit in the congregation and watch you make a fool out of yourself. He said, I'll break you from sucking eggs, buddy. So they pull over, and they change clothes, and here's the picture. They're driving into the big university. The real professor is got the blue chauffeur suit on, little chauffeur's hat on. He's driving the big car. And the chauffeur's in the back seat with a little briefcase in his lap, you know. 22,000 people in the field house, standing room only. The great PhD, what graduated from the great school of mines, is here to talk, you know. Crowded, full house. So, and as they introduced him out on the stage, he looked, and the real professor sitting in the back of the auditorium with his chauffeur suit on, just peeping at him, getting ready to watch him make a fool out of himself. Well, they said, of course, I wasn't there either, but they said, you talking about giving a speech. They said this fella shelled down the corn. Said he shucked it right on down to the top. They wallered in the aisles, hollered, threw their books up in the air. Pandemonium ensued. It took them a good 5 minutes to get the place under control. And they did, and the president of the university walked up on stage and said, well, he said, that was quite a speech. He said, would y'all like to ask this gentleman any questions? And he said, we have a few minutes before the next bell. And he said, so are there any questions for this man? And you've seen the type sitting about on the front row, horn-rimmed glasses, books under both arms, slide rule in his pocket. He said, yes, he says, I have a question for the professor. He said, Professor, if one of those dinosaurs died, roamed the earth 2 billion years ago, and his carcass lay rotting, and the Earth's atmosphere built up layer after layer after layer to 5,792 feet, and a drill bit drilling a well on a wildcat venture bores through this decayed carcass, what will the pH of the soil be contained in the core of the drill bit, and what will be the name of the stratosphere? This guy just looked at him. About 30 seconds. You could have heard a pin drop. Finally, he said, Mr. Student, he said, I'm surprised they let a fellow in this university that don't know no more than you know to ask a question like that. He said, in fact, that's one of the simplest questions I've ever been asked in all my speaking days. And said, just to show you how simple it is, my chauffeur's in the back of the room. I'll ask him to stand up and answer.